Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for joining us. It's Kim Alexander on the New Talk for Moms of Black Boys with Mob United. I am so elated this evening to join you on this day for Women's History Month with a special guest. And you know me, I usually jump in and just have individuals introduce themselves. But because it's Women's History Month and this person has made such an impact on our community and the work that she has done, I'm actually going to take the time to read her biography. So give me a moment. Janice Mathis Esquire served as executive director of the National Council for Negro Women from 2016 to 2022. Janice was responsible for NCNW's programming, communications, membership, philanthropy, legal affairs, and special events. Membership in NCNW's 330 local sections increased 14% in 2021. Together with its 33 national affiliates, the NCNW family now encompasses more than 2 million persons. During her tenure, NCNW's employee base and annual budget increased by 100%. In April of 2023, Janice assumed the role of General Counsel to NCNW, responsible for legal affairs. Janice expanded NCNW's program and social justice agenda with advocacy and educational campaigns, including Clean Water for Flint, Millennial Entrepreneurs, Emotional Health is Wealth, Kids Against COVID, STEAM Start, Hungry for Education, HBCU College Tour, Women's Economic Empowerment, and the Red Carpet Campaign to end the discrimination against women and girls. She was instrumental in crafting Good Health Wins Women's Immunization Networks, a national 5-year publicly funded effort to promote vaccine awareness. Prior to joining NCNW, Janice was general counsel and vice president of Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition and the Citizenship Education Fund, where she led civil rights and diversity efforts such as the Keep the Vote Alive campaign in 2005 to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. She implemented an effective shareholder education program, resulting in employment, contracting, and board seat opportunities with Fortune 500 companies. She sat on diversity councils, for both Georgia Power and the Coca-Cola Company. Janice testified before the U.S. Sentencing Commission and the United Nations Commission to End Racial Discrimination in Geneva. For nearly 2 decades, Janice practiced law in Athens, Georgia, in a firm she started with several law school classmates. She also served as Special Assistant Attorney General for the state of Georgia from 1990 to 1998. She served as a speechwriter and deputy issues director for Michael S. Dukakis' 1988 U.S. presidential campaign. Janice and her sisters, Davita Mathis, host Sisters in Law, a public interest program for Praise 96.9 in Greenville, South Carolina radio station. She is the recipient of numerous awards and is included in several editions of the most influential Blacks in Atlanta. Janice served on numerous boards, including the Athens Area Community Foundation United Way of Northeast Georgia League of Women's Voters and Athens Area's Opportunities Industrialization Centers, Inc. She serves as Delta Sigma Theta Sorority's National Social Action Commission, where she is responsible for helping to develop the sorority's public policy priorities. Janice formerly served as a member of the Rules Committee of the Democratic National Committee and on the National Board of the League of Women Voters of the U.S. Janice is a member of Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. She is the widowed bonus mom of 2 adult children, raised in her home, and the grand Jan. I love that. Of 3 adorable grandchildren. Janice Mathis, we are so elated to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Kimberly Robinson Alexander, the pleasure is all mine. I have been so impressed. The more I learn about Mothers of Black Boys United, the more impressed I am and optimistic that here is an organization that can change that school to prison pipeline, make our boys feel wanted and necessary, and grow into their full manhood unfettered. So the pleasure is really all mine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for following us. For Mob United, this Women's History Month, one of the things that we have done or have begun to do is look back, yes, at all of the women who have paved the way. But there is something that needs to be celebrated in someone like you who has been on the front lines for as long as you have, and for just the ability to see as much as you've seen over your career. Tell us what has inspired you, what inspired you to start, and what keeps you going.
What keeps me going, I think, is faith, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. I
Mm-hmm.
think it is knowing that the same spirit that led Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin King and Frederick Douglass still lives in us today. And
Mm-hmm.
if we don't faint and don't be scared and don't perish, we too can make steps forward. Now, we may not get everything that we want, and we may see some of it as I have over the course of my career, see gains and then see backward steps. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're not careful, you can be discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I'm just too stubborn to be I just believe. I just believe. And of course, for almost 20 years, I worked for a guy who coined the phrase keep hope alive. So that does rub off on you after a while. But in honesty, I have to say that it was my parents. They were first generation college students for the most part in their families, grew
Mm-hmm.
up through the Depression and World War II. I got so tired of hearing about World War II. It seemed like ancient history to me. I didn't want to hear about nobody walking to school barefoot and all that stuff that they used to tell us. But then I realized that when they were telling us that in the mid 60s, for them it was less than 20 years in the past. So
Right.
for them it was present. I think about 2004 seems like it was that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back, but then on the other hand, I think about young black kids today. Maybe they're 20 years old, which means they were only 8 when Barack Obama was elected president in 2012 or reelected. So life moves quickly and we have to move with it. But my folk were dedicated activists, especially my father. My mother supported him in that work. They were
Mm-hmm.
both school teachers. That was helpful because they didn't believe in doing your homework. They said, well, it's your homework. We got homework and you got homework. But it was an environment where they always voted. They were always activists in the community. They were always involved with the church and the Y and the Jack and Jill and the whatever they could get involved in to make community. Now, this is Greenville, South Carolina. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about Washington, D.C. or New York City. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the Deep South in the pre Martin Luther King 60s. Some of it was pretty tough. But,
Mm-hmm.
as Daddy would say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Winners
Mm-hmm.
never quit and quitters never win. And so
Absolutely.
you grew up with this kind of can do, don't give up. And
Mm-hmm.
me and I have one sister, Davida, who I do the podcast, the show with, and we're 15 months apart.
Mm-hmm.
And you just knew what was expected of you.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what the obstacle, you got a roof over your head, you got clothes to wear. What's your excuse? You,
Mm-hmm.
why should I have to whip you? They tell me you have an average intelligence. That means I should be able to reason with you. Why should I spit out my hair trying to whip you? You better
Mm-hmm.
get it. So it was a combination of strict upbringing, but not so. They allowed us to have parties, and and she would tell him, said, Joseph, they're gonna like boys now. Would you rather them go see the boys in the street, or would you rather let some of the boys come here to visit them? negotiate, with you. So it was a kind of we say we won the parent lottery, but it wasn't just us. Our whole community was that way. There are
Mm,
numerous judges and lawyers and doctors and Indian chiefs from that small black neighborhood because
mhm.
parents had the idea that their children could benefit from some of the good things in life.
Absolutely. And I mean, you said a mouthful there, but I think that last thing you said is the basic premise around what brought Mob United together, right? Moms of Black Boys United came together because we believe not only do our children deserve it, but they should be privy to all of the good things in life, and they should be seen as people who deserve to get it by the greater community as well.
Exactly.
Um, you have a long, career, but there is a passion behind when you speak about the economics of mass incarceration. And in our prep call, when you and I spoke, I could hear how passionate you are about how dysfunctional our prison system is and what those things look like. So before we even get into that discussion, I want you to define what are the economics of mass incarceration? What does that exactly mean?
Incarceration in this country is an industry, just like soft drinks is an industry, just like home improvement at Home Depot is an industry, just like generating power is an industry. Incarceration is an industrialized entity in the United States, more than any other country in the world, especially more than any industrialized nation in the world. We incarcerate more people per capita than Russia and China, the people we look down upon as being anti democratic.
Mm-hmm.
Per capita, we are the incarceration haven of the world. And why is that? Because in a capitalist society, almost anything that you can make money off of becomes institutionalized. Sometimes there was a period of time when I represented a fair number of people accused of criminal offenses. And we would go into the courtroom, especially with the younger people. I would point out to them, sort of, you see the judge, he makes about $150,000 a year. You
Mm-hmm.
see the court reporter, she's getting paid probably 75 or 80. You got a
Mm-hmm.
clerk of court who's making 60, 70. There's a bailiff over there, he makes probably about 80,000. And guess
Mm-hmm.
what? You and your grandmama paying for all of it.
Right.
You're the only person in this courtroom who's footing the bill for the building, the air conditioner, the cars, the sirens, the jails. All of this is on your family's back.
Mm-hmm.
And that would seem to sort of for some of my clients, that would say to them, I need to find another industry to get involved in because this industry is not profitable for me. So instead of trying to talk down and moralize, I would try to talk about, because I am an econ major, try to talk to them about, does this make economic sense? Does this make financial sense for you?
Mm-hmm.
And many of them would sort of gravitate to that idea that it's a choice. When you go to South Georgia, where the prison colonies are, massive prison, nothing surrounding it, open, vacant country land. You
Mm-hmm.
might see some pastures with cows and pigs in it, but that's it. The only industry there is the prison. It has jobs, it has job security, it has a sort of a way of life and a culture.
Mm-hmm.
There's always jobs at the prison. They're always looking for somebody who can get inside the barbed wire and help keep order.
Right.
The telephones cost money. The cigarettes cost more money than if you were at the grocery store or the drugstore.
Mm-hmm.
The snack machines cost money. If you want extra flip flops or extra bedding or extra clothing, everything is sold to you at a premium.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very unhealthy and ineffective environment. What we know for sure that the longer someone is incarcerated, the higher the rate of recidivism is. Why? Because we've stripped them of their humanity. We've stripped them of whatever skills they've not been able to continue. We know that young men don't become emotionally or mentally mature until about age 25. If
Right.
we could get most people to age 25, by the time you get to age 25 or 30, you're pretty much done taking high risk in order to make a few dollars. And so when I look at it as an industry for those reasons, because there are a lot of economic incentives. I was in a courtroom once, and as was typical, the judge would ask the probation officer for a recommendation in terms of sentencing. You've
Mhm.
been convicted of shoplifting. You got your sentencing is a year and $1,000 fine. Uh, and the judge looks at the probation officer and said, "Do we have a bed?" Now, who is we? And what bed is he talking about? You could go to a halfway house. You could go home on probation with a leg monitor. But if we, the judge, the prosecutor, the police, all those people I was just talking about, if we have a bed, I'm gonna send you to be incarcerated because I understand as a judge that I'm creating a job for somebody who might be related to me.
Mhm.
I could go on, but I think you get my point.
I get your point. I get your point. I have so many things brewing up inside of me. One of them being so we're in a situation like that space you're talking about in Georgia, um where privatized prisons is really the only industry there. But how do prisons get into where they are? They have to get permission from the state. Like, what does that process look like?
It looks like the sausage that is made when each state budget is cut. It looks like every year, or at most every 2 years, the legislature meets in Atlanta, far away from these prison colonies, and they decide what Georgia's taxpayers' money will be spent on.
Mhm.
And guess what happens when you build a prison? It's not just that prison, it's the economic development that comes with it. Because once you build a prison, communities who don't have any industry, they look at a prison. That's a good thing. We get ready to get us a prison. You get jobs, but you also get a McDonald's because McDonald's is going to come there to serve the people who work there and the people who come to visit. And then you get a Holiday Inn or some kind of hotel because 9 times out of 10, if you're coming from Atlanta to visit somebody down in Jackson, Georgia, where the diagnostic prison is, you can't get back in the same day. So you got to spend the night someplace. And then you got to get gasoline because one tank of gas won't take you from Atlanta to Jackson and back. So now
Mhm.
there's a quick trip in the neighborhood. So you build a whole community around the incarceration industry. The prison is the center of it, and the lives that are being damaged are the fuel for it. But it spreads far beyond the physical facility itself.
So is there
All the way to
incentive to
Wall
stop
Street.
incarcerating?
Hmm?
Is there incentive to stop incarcerating them?
Georgia, which is where I'm most familiar with, Georgia finally got to the point where they were spending more money on incarceration, or just about the same amount, over $1 billion a year, as they were spending on education. And people like me and others, NAACP and lots of other groups, started saying this doesn't make economic sense.
Mhm.
We know you got a fetish about locking people up, but you mean to tell me that you're gonna take taxpayer money and spend more of it on things that don't work, that destroy lives and communities, rather than investing in people's lives and education and social services and supports and mental health care and expanding Medicaid? You'd rather spend your money on put it in a hole than use it to build up your. And so gradually, the mandatory minimums in Georgia started to be relaxed a little bit. Some of the sentences, it's not perfect by any means, don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but finally, the economic madness of it started to become embarrassing to some of the politicians in Georgia. And I think that's what it takes. I don't think the sociology argument is going to solve it alone. I think it's going to help. I think it's going to have to be green dollar bills. When you travel around the world, you know what Americans are known for? Greed.
Mhm.
that we'll sell our grandmama for enough. If you put enough dollars in our hand, you can have anything we got if you're willing to trade cash for it.
Mhm.
And that is a perception that those of us who see a different, better way have to just keep making that case over and over and over again.
So, with incarceration, we certainly can't ignore the 60% of individuals who are incarcerated who have a mental health diagnosis. They are not being treated. They're not being treated in prisons. They're being housed in prisons, and they come out with the same mental health issues, and no, there's nothing to mitigate that. We talk about the school to prison pipeline. I call it the cradle to prison pipeline because by trade I'm a nurse, and I've seen so many children age 3, the ADHD diagnosis for regular ages and stages behavior. Let's start them on medications and let's do this. And our children being boxed into places and spaces, um, being suspended from places like preschool for normal behavior, and having their development stunted by this idea that they have to behave in a particular way, taking the arts out of programs, taking gym out of programs, isolating children who need additional assistance, and basically pushing them away from their peers, and taking away their ability to socialize, to problem solve, to have peer mediation and all of those things. And so I think we're talking about like the mass incarceration of it all and our children being put away, but we can't ignore mental health and the how poorly schools are managing our children. How do we partner from that perspective to change mass incarceration?
Well, this is going to sound overly simplistic, but remember, both my parents were school teachers.
Mhm.
PTA, Parent Teacher Association,
Mhm.
Parents Night at school. And
Mhm.
it's tough when you're working maybe a couple of jobs to make ends meet,
Mhm.
but being present on a routine, regular basis, they know you're not going to treat this child that way because her mama will be over here in a few minutes.
Mhm.
Not to raise hell or to act up,
Mhm.
but to say, as I said with when my daughter was in high school and she was all upset because somebody said something to her and spilled some orange drink on her pants and she was ready to fight.
Mhm.
I said, well, first of all, I think I bought the pants and I'm the one that puts them in the dry cleaner. So I know you're not getting ready to fight over some orange soda on some pants. But I
Mhm.
did go to the school and you know what I said to them? You are in a nearly all white neighborhood. The school was
Mhm.
something like less than 10% black students.
Mhm.
You don't celebrate Black History Month. You don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. You are not educating these children to live in the real world that they're going to encounter. Not
Mhm.
every culture is the same. Not every child is going to react the same. So before you point a finger at the child, let's think about what are you doing to give the child a whole educational experience,
Mhm.
not just what's in the covers of some antiquated book, but coping skills, as you said, negotiation skills,
Mhm.
all the things that it takes, making the child feel seen and valued in
Mhm.
their culture, um, understanding difference, and that people learn in different. There are all kinds of styles of learning. We know now that we're doing brain science. You
Mhm.
know more about this than I do. Children can learn in any number of ways, and then if children come from a background where there is some dysfunction, you have to be careful not to make their situation worse by punishing the acting out when you don't know what happened at home last night or what happened before they left this morning. You don't know whether they had Cheerios or nothing for breakfast this
Right.
morning. You don't know whether they hear well. You don't know whether they need eyeglasses. You don't know whether they have a toothache. And what to me is damnable, it doesn't seem like you care to know. Not only do you not know, but you're not trying to find out. That's not teaching.
Mhm.
That's not being an educator. An educator's got to be concerned. And how do we make that part of the systematic way of learning?
Mhm.
School board meetings. So who's on the state legislature? Who's on the education committee in your state, in the legislature, who's taking the federal dollars, Title I schools, taking those dollars and deciding how to divvy them up.
Mm-hmm.
Why should the quality of a child's educational experience depend on what the tax bracket of the neighborhood that he comes from is? That doesn't make sense. To be honest with you, Kimberly, public education benefits the society as much or more than it benefits the child. Suppose we didn't, there was a time when we didn't have free public education in the United States. That
Mm-hmm.
basically came with the end of the Civil War. That was really a black thing. When the black folk got free and started getting elected, they established public schools in the South.
Mm-hmm.
So now, do we want roaming bands of uneducated people in the street? Or are we all safer and better off when voters can read enough to understand who they're voting for?
Mm-hmm.
When Medicaid has been expanded so every child can get basic exam at least once a year, get their teeth checked, get their eyes, get their hearing checked. You can't learn if you're sitting in the classroom and you can't even see the blackboard.
Mm-hmm.
And when a child feels left out or bullied or picked upon, or you're slow, you're labeled, you're this, then the best of us would start to act out.
Right.
I'd act out myself. I have
Mm-hmm.
acted out in the courtroom one time, and Judge hollered at me. I hollered right back at him. I forgot I wasn't supposed to holler at the judge. Hollered at me just because he had never seen a black woman lawyer before. Don't start that with me today.
So I had the opportunity to have a conversation with the judge once, and she told a story, and the story kind of hit home for me because it was about how um, it was about why this young man continued to commit the same crime. You know, you've been in front of me X amount of times, and you continue to commit the same crime over and over again. And he was getting sentenced, and he's going away. And they asked the question about the economics of it. You know, it does this benefit you? And essentially, he said, yeah. You know, I made the money I was going to make, and now I'm going home to, you know, 3 hots and a cot, and I don't have to worry about anything. And so, you know, I had my fun while I had it. And now I'm just going to go. And I know that I'm going to be taken care of. Yeah, it ain't the best environment, but I'm going to be okay. Because sometimes the street is worse for me than even being incarcerated. How do we change that mentality? How do we get our young men and women to see themselves as worthy of more than that?
There are some things that we know that work. Allowing children to be seen and appreciated for who they are. My sister has one daughter. She's at Howard now working on, I think, her third degree. But when she was in elementary school, they wanted to test her for ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
But she could already write her name and she could read a little bit. She was in the second grade or something. She was teaching other children how to write their names.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you need to sit in your seat. Well, she wasn't trying to sit in a seat. She was trying to teach the other children who didn't know how to write their names.
Mm-hmm.
And there was they wanted testing. And I told her, I said, if you let that child be labeled ADHD, I'm going to come down there and get you. And but you know what she did? She started leaving her office every day after lunch to take a gold star to her school. Has Avery been, I shouldn't say her name, has she been good today? She's been good. She got a gold. Her mother gave her a gold star. Now, the teacher could have given her a gold star for being good that day, but the teacher didn't have enough creativity and intelligence to understand how to motivate a child with a little too much energy.
Mm-hmm.
After 3 or 4 months of that, which I thought was just remarkable that my sister was willing and able to make that commitment every day,
Mm-hmm.
everything was fine. She conformed her behavior because she got what she needed, which was affirmation, appreciation, understanding. That's what they all need. Only thing that bothered me about it is they were paying college tuition for a third grade education at some private school in South Carolina. And I thought, yeah, okay, okay. But I think it starts there. I think it's being seen, being heard, being understood, being cared for, being appreciated. We all, like in the movie The Color Purple,
Mm,
God get mad at you if you walk past The Color Purple. If you walk past a child and ignore their potential, I think that makes God angry. They
mm,
all have potential. It may not be the same level of achievement, may not be the same kind of talent, but we're all sent here with a blessing. And and then creating community. Children perform, I think, up to their parents' expectations. All kids want to please their parents.
mm,
If their parents are engaged with them and love them, and they know even when they're bad, even though I'm gonna punish you and you got to go to timeout, I
mhm,
still love you more than anything in the world, and I'm doing this because I love you. That thing. And then beyond the nuclear family is the community.
mhm,
It may not be church, or it may be church. It may not be Boy Scouts, or it may be Boy Scouts, but
mhm,
children need to be. Is it sports after school? Is it the Y? Is it the Boys and Girls Club? I'm invested in a new venture where we're going to be doing some after school and weekend work with kids. Just having fun, just writing poetry, writing music, doing whatever they enjoy doing, and
mhm,
doing some homework, doing some math too.
mhm,
But you have a place where you will always be valued and appreciated and respected, and your peers. And we find that kids who go through these kinds of programs come out not only having changed themselves, but changed the systems, the school systems, the criminal justice systems. They come out as the best evidence that punishment and retribution don't work as well as love and attention and care. Everybody wants attention. And I used to say that, I collected child support for a while. That was that special assistant attorney job. One of my jobs was to take people to court who weren't paying their child support.
mhm,
And you know what I would tell them though, because they come to school with a smooth haircut and the
mhm,
new necklaces and the clean sneakers. I said, let me tell you something. You better go find some money. Because when we come back from lunch, if you don't have some money, you're going to spend the night up here with this judge. And I'm going home to my house. But then at the end, I would tell them that, um, so what, you can't pay the child support, pay the child some attention. That's
mhm,
what will last. The child may not know, it may not remember, may not care what you paid in child support, but they will never forget that you
mhm,
took them to the zoo or took them to the movie or came by
mhm,
and was nice to their mama, remembered their birthday with a card. She won't let me come visit. I said, you got a phone? Buy the child a phone. And then you can talk to the child anytime you feel like.
mhm,
Don't make excuses about why you have to be absent. That
mhm,
child deserves love and care and companionship and knowing that somebody in the world, the teacher may not like me, the principal may be on my back, but I
mhm,
got an auntie, and it doesn't take a whole lot. I got an uncle. I got somebody
mhm,
that will stand up for me. Our children need advocates and defenders
mhm.
inside the classroom and out. So that's my sermon. I'm sticking with it.
We do have a question from the audience. Rosalind is asking, she says, good evening. I work at a school district in Ohio. What kind of advice you give a young man who's in the third grade when he says that he doesn't need school because he is going to end up in jail like his father? Wow. That's such a profound statement. To me, that's
I would.
learned behavior. Somebody's telling him that.
It's learned, but it's also natural. He knows when his birthday comes that his dad is not there. He doesn't have to learn. Nobody has to tell him that. He feels it. My father was ended up being on city council, a successful Hall of Fame football coach, pastor of a church. Until his dying day at age 80, he never got over the fact that he didn't know his father.
Wow.
He took that energy, that hurt and that pain, thank God, and turned it into being a devoted, caring, present father.
Mhm.
But that pain never really left him. And I've seen it over and over. Greg Mathis, the judge, same
Mhm.
story. Jesse Jackson, the activist, same story. Um, so what we have to do with children is say to them, okay, your dad is not present, but your uncle's coming to get you. Mama's boyfriend is going to take you to the zoo.
Mhm.
We got to find substitutes, safe substitutes, not predatory substitutes, but safe substitutes. And, be careful about the boyfriends because some of them got ulterior motives. And
Mhm.
I've seen some terrible stories about that. But reinforce. Um, help the child find a book where he can see himself in the story,
Mhm.
or boys club, or some kind of after school program, athletics if you can afford it. That gets to be right expensive. But just finding ways to engage the child in something beyond that pain. That pain may not go away, but what
Mhm.
you're gonna do is give him ways to cope with it. And when he says, "I don't need school because I'm going to jail," I also know you're not, because I'm not gonna let that happen to you. We get
Mhm.
ready to work on that every day. And I'm
Mhm.
not gonna I'm not gonna tolerate you're going that way. Because you're
Right.
too smart for that. And I love you too much for that. It just takes a lot of, and we know what works, but we're not doing enough of it, and we're not doing it consistently enough. And we're putting too much of it, frankly, on moms and not enough of it on the community. It's
Mhm.
a community issue. Dad is locked up because of a violation of a community law. So
Mhm.
why would we expect his mother alone to be able, or his teacher alone to be able to? You got to lock arms around kids.
Mhm.
Mama would bring them home with her from school, which I
Mhm.
didn't always like. I didn't really want to be sharing my house and my TV with nobody, but she made us and said that child lives in foster care. You don't know what it's like not to be able to go home to your own parents. And you
Mhm.
will not fight with them and you will not argue with them because they deserve your kindness and respect like everybody else. That's a village. That's
Absolutely.
that's the village. And that's what I like about Moms of Black Boys. You are a village. You're a
Mhm.
big national village. But with this podcast, you're helping people understand that there are other ways. You
Mhm.
can't just drop them off at grandmama's house either because she ain't got the energy to keep up with no first grader. Times
Mhm.
9, times 10.
Yeah,
So
so
maybe
talk of for Moms of Black Boys. We are talking with Janice Mathis, who has such a long and just inspiring career. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. Something that you touched on when we were talking about the different civic bodies, like the school board and being on PTA. Our focus in 2024 is really about voting empowerment, voting education, because I think that we get the messaging out loud all the time about um, go out there and vote, go out there and vote. But I don't know that we always understand what we are voting for and what that looks like for the community. So, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is the difference between federal and local elections and how those directly impact our community. As we get back to the conversation about the economics of mass incarceration, how do those directly, the local elections directly impact what comes into our communities?
okay, I'm going to start sort of in the middle because that's where I think the most important decisions are made. Your state legislature
Okay.
gets all the federal money. Most federal money doesn't go straight to Cleveland or to Atlanta or
Mhm.
Charlotte. It goes first to the state capital to
Mhm.
be appropriated
Mhm.
by the budget committee at the state level. And the education committee will make its recommendations to the budget committee.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's the governor and the people who are writing the state budget who decide what resources are put into the schools. Now, most public schools in the United States are funded by county property taxes.
Mhm.
This is where your local government comes in. Most school systems, except for big places like New York and Chicago, schools are operated by the county government. So if I live in Atlanta, that's not going to mean a whole lot unless I'm going to the Fulton County Commission to talk to that finance body. How
Mhm.
are they appropriating their funds? What are they doing about after school programs? What are they doing about teacher pay? Each level of government, local, state, and federal, school board and county government at the local level, state legislature at the state level, federal government at the national level, each has a role to play in education.
Mhm.
At the federal level, you're talking about IEPs, individualized education plans for children who may have disabilities, and attacking those. There are resources at the federal level for that.
Mhm.
There's civil rights legislation and regulation, Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education. If a child is not getting an individualized education, there's a place to complain about that. At the state level, it's so critical. When
Mhm.
Biden boasts about the money he's sending to localities, no, bruh, you sending them to these states first. Did you hear what he said the other night in the speech? He said, I know y'all, some of y'all got that infrastructure money, but you didn't vote for the bill, but you sure was glad to get the money. And if you don't want the money, you can send it back. That's
Mhm.
what he was talking about. Instead of the money going directly to Cleveland or Cincinnati or Chicago, it
Mhm.
first goes to the state legislature, and they prioritize where are we going to build new schools, where are we going to increase teacher pay, where are we going to reduce class size. You understand what I'm saying? Where are we going to have summer programs?
Mhm.
State government. You know why it's so crazy? Federal government, you can hear about that every night on the news.
Mhm.
Local government is in your local newspaper. Your state government is almost hidden from view.
Wow.
They they go away. They're not in Chicago. They down in Southern Illinois.
Mhm.
In New York, they're not in New York City. They up in Albany.
Mhm.
They making law away from where the people who need to know about the law actually live. So you got to get in your car and travel and go where they are, or try to run them down when they come home for breaks. So you need to know the committee structure. Who's on the rules committee? Whatever you want can't get voted on unless it gets passed by the rules committee at the state level.
Mhm.
I almost wish that organizations like NCNW, not almost, I do wish, and Moms of Black Boys, that we could go in together and pool our resources and hire us some state lobbyists, some people to be there and watch for us all the time.
Mhm.
And let us know, okay, y'all need to call now. We need you calling Senator so and so because he's getting ready to vote the wrong way. Because they in that building all day, every. And then the craziest thing, generally the state government meets from like January to April,
Mhm.
and then they're done. Except all summer they have these little camps and these little conferences where they think about what they're gonna do next year. So by the time it gets to January and the legislature's opening up, they done already built their agenda. They've
Mhm.
already decided how they're going to gerrymander the district so that politicians are picking their voters instead of voters picking their elected officials.
Wow.
So it takes a lot of energy and effort. But what I see in Moms of Black Boys, you've got the following. You can assign people, even if you can't be there. Now we got all this technology, you can be there virtually. Almost all the state legislatures now have a way that you can watch the deliberations and read the bills and follow them online. You don't have necessarily have to be there. It takes a little figuring, you know, how to but look, Miss Kimberly, I know you can figure it out. And I
Mhm.
and I and I can help if you decide you want to do something like that. So I know I was rambling, but local, state, and federal each has its own rule. They're operating a lot of times in silence and secrecy.
Mhm.
That's why they call it making sausage, because you don't want to see how much skin and bone and fat went into that sausage.
Definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, strategic partnerships so that we can forward the mission and purpose of the organization. And we are always looking for like minded organizations to do so with. Um, it is it is truly one of the top tier things that we are always looking to do. We want to leverage our voice, and we want to be a resource in our community. So I certainly will be taking you up on that offer. During your introduction, you said something that I wrote down. You said ancient history, and I've been kind of talking about that in a different way for a little while now, because I really do believe that our younger generations um, really feel like voting is an ancient history in some ways. Like they don't see the value of it. And we've talked about a lot of different reasons why. Instant gratification with social media. You can be TikTok famous and you can be Instagram famous. And then also because we put so much emphasis on federal elections, but they are, one of our chapter leaders here in Houston, Amber, she said, outside of the inauguration, you don't really hear too much. Like the federal election happens, the president is inaugurated, and then that goes away. Meanwhile, everything that's happening, like you just described in our local jurisdictions, are staying the same. How do we get our young people back to be reinvested in the voting process and what that means, and to help them understand how it does impact the community locally?
Well, a couple of things. One thing that comes to mind is the situation in Gaza. You say young people, we say that young people are alienated, they don't care about voting. But when it's something they care about and they
Mm-hmm.
understand it, in Michigan, they voted uncommitted because we don't like genocide in Gaza. It may be 5,000 miles away, but we still don't like it. And we willing to vote to express our displeasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a young man at my office say, 25 years old. We have a very intergenerational staff. I'm like the grandmom where I got people young enough to be my grandchildren on staff. And he said, well, the only reason Biden did something about it, is talking about doing something about it, is because they voted uncommitted in Michigan. I said, well, now hold on, wait a minute. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that a democracy that's working?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you want the president to change his mind if the people are upset and want something different?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one example of how citizens can spontaneously change people in government point of view because they can go to the streets and express themselves. That still works. Um, in 2006, I led a demonstration in Atlanta. About 15,000 people voted in the hot sun because the Voting Rights Act was up for reauthorization. This is before it was gutted in 2013 in Shelby versus Holder. George Bush decided he was going to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act before we ever marched because he heard about the march, heard we were getting ready to turn Atlanta out, turn Atlanta upside down. And he went on and signed it before we could even, I think we marched like August something, August 28th. He signed the bill in June. It still works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Look at George Floyd. Now that was a terrible, terrible,
Mm-hmm.
terrible thing to see somebody on live television killing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Young people got engaged in that, not just in this country, but around the world.
Yep.
And I think there are those kinds of examples that show that there is power. And then now flip it over and ask this question: what in your life is not affected by government? Tell me one thing in your life that is unaffected by the people who are elected. The judges in most places are elected. So if you don't like the way they rule, you can vote on them. The toilet tissue in the bathroom, the content of it is regulated by some federal agency or some state agency. The lights that we turn on, if we flip the switch and the lights don't come on, the Public Service Commission is responsible for distribution of electricity around the country. Unless you're in Texas, they got their own system, and we see how that doesn't work too well. And let me say this: I hate what they're doing in Houston. Houston is one of the most, Houston is one of the most vibrant, productive, innovative cities in the country, and that's why they're under attack. Because as Houston goes, That's you talking about ancient history. Houston is Texas' future,
Hmm.
and they know it, and that's why they scared of it. And I
Mm,
just say to my Houstonians, don't y'all give up. It's always darkest just before dawn. Slavery was at its worst just before the Civil War broke out. Don't give up hope. Time is on our side. Demographics is on our side. Houston is a remarkable metropolis.
mhm,
Healthcare, education, industry,
mhm.
energy, you name it, Houston's got it. That's why y'all on the chopping block. Don't give up hope. Keep hope alive. Keep going. Jesse used to tell us, say, if you can't get in the room, at least leave some footprints on the doorway you were trying to kick it in.
Well, I'm here and I like it here, so I guess I'm staying in Houston. So we gonna keep the hope alive here, and
I Houston is remarkable, and Atlanta's attacked for the same reason.
mm,
Chicago for the same reason. That when you see these prosperous, growing cities, black folk living well, got good jobs, that does not fit the paradigm. So we
mm,
got to try to stifle that. It's gonna be all right.
yeah. So strategies.
Yeah,
Talk throughout this conversation about different things that potentially work. Um, but ultimately, we need to make sure that privatized prisons and all that comes with it no longer want to house our boys. We need to make sure that they don't get there in the first place. So, tell us more about how to prevent the incarceration versus what to do once they get there.
children are people, and children, just like all people, need love and attention. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a nice roof over your head and food all the time, but more than anything else, they need love and attention. And mom can't be expected to provide all of that on her own. That's not fair. The child is a child of a village. The village has got to lock arms. So does that mean? I think it means serious after school and extracurricular activity. I think it means that what happens in school that may be good enough for timetables and basic reading, but they need Saturday programs, after school programs. Children need to stay busy. How do you do that? You got to have funding in order to make that work.
Mhm.
So that means these organizations like NCNW who got money and can get grant money
Mhm.
need to be getting grant money for those kinds of activities. That's one thing. The other thing is we cannot give up on democracy. People who are telling us not to vote would prefer that decisions be made by a small group of people at the top, like in Russia. And we don't have any say so. Yeah, we don't always get what we vote, but we sometimes we're disappointed. But then sometimes you get a Barack Obama or
Mhm.
you get somebody who seems that they really care. It's never going to be perfect. So you got to vote, you got to organize communities, and then we have to have an economic strategy. When some of us succeed financially, economically, the first thing we want to do is move out the hood. We want to go to the suburbs. We want to, take a European vacation and, get a big diamond ring and fur coat or whatever it is. You don't need a fur coat in Houston, but you understand my point. You want to start living a more elaborate lifestyle.
Mhm.
That's normal. That's natural. You deserve to be rewarded. But 10%, 15% save and invest for the future.
Mhm.
My mother never had a big diamond ring or fur coat, never got on an airplane.
Mhm.
But when I got accepted at Duke and my sister got accepted at Oberlin 1 year later, she was able to write a check
Mhm.
because the priorities were straight. What we know for sure about black boys, if they drop out of school in the ninth grade, they got a 70% chance of going to prison. If they finish high school, that's cut in half. If
Mhm.
they do one semester of college, it drops down to around 15%.
Right.
If they finish college, it drops to almost zero. We should be paying Black boys to go to school. That's this program that I'm working with, and I'll be able to tell you more in about a year. I'm gonna
Mhm.
pay them $120 a week if they come see me 3 days a week.
Mhm.
If they show up, go to school, stay out of trouble, even though they're just in the 8th grade, they're gonna earn $10 an hour for every hour they spend in the program.
Wow.
You don't need to go. You don't need to do nothing to get money. I'm gonna give you your gaming money and your clothes money and your after school lunch money. We're gonna take care of that, but I need you to take care of behavior and attendance and academic performance. And I'm gonna show you how to be a leader. Them people that laughing at you because you're a nerd, they're gonna be working for you. Don't worry about that. In 10 years, they'll be working at the McDonald's that you own. We've got to create a culture, and it's not easy, but it's economics, political, and that loving, caring village. I think are the three elements of the plan.
And so this program that you're talking about, you shared some of it with me before, and how do you think one, how do you think that that could be duplicated? That's number one. Like, this is going to happen in your area, your general area. That's where you'll pilot it. That's where you'll start out. But then, how do we then create these kinds of programs other places? And then, how do we combat the naysayers? Because the moment we start winning, we know that we're going to come up against something else. When we had Black Wall Street, they burned it down. So, what is your strategy for keeping this going and for sharing it?
First of all, the idea is not new. I'm patterning this after programs that existed in the Washington, D.C. area in the 1970s and 80s. It worked then. The funding dried up, the political will, you had the right wing come in with Reagan and the money dried up. And so the programs died for lack of support.
Mhm.
Now we've got a resource that we didn't have. Houston, Atlanta, Charlotte, New Orleans, New York, all these cities run by Black folk now. And so there ought not be any reason that the appropriation is not there, especially if you can show that they are effective in helping children reach their full potential and curbing crime.
Mm.
What could be better than that? So I'm talking about sustainability in terms of partnering with leadership in our populous cities and counties to start. Then we prove that the concept works, and then it ought to be able to sell itself.
Okay.
But you're right, they're gonna come at you. But this is not new. We've known. Look, when I was 10 or 12, I went to summer school at Catholic church, and they taught us science and math and stuff. We know what works with disadvantaged kids. We know. We just hadn't been willing. We haven't had the political and economic will to do it.
Mm.
And that's what we got to change. We got to hold our own urban and Black elected officials accountable for what we really need.
I think we have another question here. She says, Linnell says, how do you feel about the new crime bill passed in Washington, D.C. to stop the crime in the area?
I think Mayor Bowser is between a sort of a rock and a hard place. DC, more than anything, is a show place for outsiders. People come to Washington from all over the world. This week, it's the Polish and the Hungarians who are in Washington lobbying to get money to take back to Poland and Hungary to help win the war in the Ukraine. DC is mostly a tourist city. It's cherry blossom time. People come here from Japan to see the cherry blossom. I say all that to say that one of the mayor's jobs in DC is unlike the mayor of any other city except perhaps New York. Is it's a show place. And so people expect it to be all tourist friendly and safe and sound and this and that and no homeless people and at least none you can see.
Mm.
So that's part of her job is to make the city tourist visitor friendly. But that is a direct conflict with civil liberties and what you're willing to do. Now, if she had the ability to, first of all, DC was a state and she could actually appropriate money from her own taxation,
Mhm.
then she could reinstate programs that really do work around making sure people have jobs and transportation. DC is very unaffordable. You saw that Marsha Fudge left the Department of HUD yesterday.
Mhm.
Marsha put 1 million people in homes during the time that she was at HUD. That's important. We haven't built any new public housing in this country really in 40 years. We got the
Mhm.
same, if we haven't expanded Section 8 significantly in 30 years. So, how can you have a vibrant community? Why would you not expect crime if people can't afford to find a place to live? We're survivalists first and foremost. People will do what is necessary to survive unless you give them a better, easier, less risky way.
Mhm.
So, it's not a perfect answer, but that's what I think we need.
And that takes me back to the program that you're talking about, reenacting in your community. If children are being paid and can actually assist with some of their basic needs, we know they shouldn't have to. But if they are experiencing insecurities, food insecurities, housing insecurities, clothing insecurities, like just their basic necessities, we go back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? If those basic foundational needs are not met for our community, I don't care how old you are. It could be the 90-year-old who's sitting in the rocking chair on the porch. If those basic necessities are not being met, then how do we expect our community to care about anything else? And I think that's where so many people kind of fall back. Like, this doesn't matter to me because I'm not going to see any relief here. How do we get our people to start reinvesting in the ways that we can create relief for them?
One of the ways is to literally reinvest in our own communities. Um, I would encourage, matter of fact, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers will be traveling the country this summer with a program they call Buy Back the Block.
Mm.
If you're in Houston or Atlanta, you're in an underserved neighborhood. I live in an underserved neighborhood here in Maryland, but I purchased a building in an underserved neighborhood in my hometown because I wanted to be one of those persons who was saying, no, I believe in this Black community. I believe it can thrive. But now there's a new hospital on one side and a new baseball stadium on the other. It took us 20 years, but the neighborhood has now been gentrified. And instead of us having run away from the neighborhood, we stayed there until it came back.
Mm.
My niece calls it, that same niece that had to get the gold star. She said, that's my reparations. I said, yeah, well, we paid for your reparations, dear heart. But that's investing in our own communities. If you don't want to live there, fine, but at least invest in it. So that,
Mhm.
look at Brooklyn.
Mhm.
For a while, then nobody want to live in Brooklyn. Now you can't buy a place in Brooklyn unless you got a few $1,000,000.
Mhm.
Be patient. Invest in ourselves. I think that's very, very important.
I live in Houston, but I'm from Harlem. I still don't want to live in Brooklyn, Janice. I still don't want to live in Brooklyn.
Say brownstones notwithstanding. The other thing we did, the other thing that makes these programs work, you know where we got our goals from? We got them from the school system. What would make your school work better? It would work better if our children attended regularly. We
Mm.
know that some of them are not coming to school because they need to work to help with family finances.
Mhm.
When they can't come to school regularly, then naturally they're not going to be able to keep up academically. So
Mhm.
you got attendance and academics. And when a child finds that he's not or she's not keeping up academically, what are they going to do? Disrupt. They're going to try to draw attention away from the academics to something else, make it be about something else. So academics, attendance, and discipline, that came straight out of the county government problem, what they assessed as their needs.
Mhm.
So we're going to see. Invite me back this time next year. I'll tell you whether it really works or not.
Absolutely. You brought up the children who disrupt because there's something going on, whether that's at home or some sort of cognitive delay or what have you. We don't always know what it is that they're dealing with. One of the things that we're launching this year is called the Grace Campaign, and I've been talking a lot about it because it is actually a project that's really near and dear to my heart. Our children don't should not have to be perfect to be seen, and so. I think it's hard to find mentors and people who will pour into children who are disruptive, who say they don't want to be there, even though they want the love and attention. What do you say to people who have the ability to change the trajectory of a young man or a young girl's um, life, even though it might be hard?
The first thing I would say is that there's nothing more rewarding. I have a friend who is in her, I guess she's almost 40 years old now. But when she was 7, she was a terror. She was a terror. She would show up at my office after school, and I learned over the we became friends. She wanted to sell me some Girl Scout cookies.
Hmm.
We became friends. Now 30 years later, we are still friends.
Wow.
She did not finish college, but she did graduate from high school, and
Mm-hmm.
she has remained consistently employed. She has a lovely home, a loving husband, and a beautiful daughter. Her
Mm-hmm.
mother was on crack the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of those years, I didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
But we would go to church, and we didn't spend a whole lot of time together. We went to church, we went shopping. So birthday, I figured out how to get a birthday cake over to the school.
Mhm.
Small things. But she says to me they meant a lot
Mhm.
at the time when she's 7, 8, 9, 10,
Mhm.
15. And it meant a lot to me that she was able, okay, so you're not going to college, but you graduate from high school and you got a
Mhm.
decent job and you got one baby and one husband and y'all living in a nice brick house in the suburbs of Atlanta. I'm good. I'm straight
Mhm.
because the trajectory of your family has significantly changed.
Mhm.
It didn't cost me a whole lot of money, it didn't cost me a whole lot of time, but it's
Mhm.
probably the most satisfying relationship other than with my immediate family that I've had.
Mhm.
So I would say to people, you don't know what dividends investing in a child will pay.
Yeah. I was one of those terror kids. I spent a lot of time with teachers. Just kind of getting lunch at lunchtime with teachers instead of peers, and they, like you said, they didn't always know what was wrong, but they knew there was something there. And I was fortunate that I had family, but I had people in my church who invested in me, and I had people in school who would invest in me. Um, and it really did change. And I stay in contact with a lot of those people. Last summer, I was in New York and actually had lunch with my seventh grade English teacher, who was the first person who told me I was a good writer. And so those relationships really do matter, and it does matter when you have an ability to kind of see past that facade, the wall that requires us to kind of protect ourselves. So kudos to you for that relationship, and I think that's great advice. Just kind of stick with it. Those are the seeds that are planted to what could be, because my life really could have been a lot different than it is, for myself and for my children. Before we end, we're just about at time. I want to know, what else is NCNW doing? What else is Janice doing?
NCNW works on 4 pillars:
Mm-hmm.
education with a focus on science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We're
Mm-hmm.
launching a brand new program called Bethune Height after our founders, Bethune Height Leadership Program. And it is a bridge from college to career. So you want to go into nursing, we're going to help you find a program. If you need funding, we're going to help you find scholarship money. If you want to be an engineer, we're going to help you make that leap from, okay, you finish high school or you finish technical school or you're coming out of the military, but you need a bridge to what's next. That's my favorite question to ask young people when I talk to them. What's next? What's next? What's your horizon? What are you looking forward to? Because the
Mhm.
answers are always interesting. So that's one thing. The other is the 8-state strategy.
Mhm.
We've chosen 8 states, and we're going to try to make sure that every 11th and 12th grader in those 8 states are registered to vote, know why it's important, and have a plan to actually participate in the elections this year. That's sort of what we're doing, and that's pretty much the
Mhm.
focus of what we're doing. Now,
Amen.
I filed an amicus brief. I don't know if you've heard of the Fearless Fund case where the black women in Atlanta were raising money to give each other, and they got sued for reverse discrimination, saying that that was discrimination against white people for black
No.
women to be giving each other money. And so we entered that lawsuit on
Mhm.
behalf of the Fearless Fund because we think that that's a wonderful thing for us to save money and give it to each other to help start your business. Why would anybody want to get sued for that? Why would anybody want to sue somebody for that? But it's been a lot in the news, especially like here and some of these corporations, Mastercard, Bank of America, are being threatened with lawsuits. West
Mhm.
Point Academy, military academy, being threatened with reverse discrimination lawsuits because of their diversity programs, which is another reason to vote, by the way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the moral of the story, right? That's the moral of the story every day and for every year, but especially in 2024. This is such a pivotal election year. We definitely need to be educated and we need to be voting. Um, the Economics of Mass Incarceration. Give us the top three things we need to know about it and the top three things we need to be doing about it.
Number one thing, your prison system is funded by your state government for the most part. Most prisoners are in state and local facilities, they are not in federal prisons. Second thing you need to know is that whether it is private prison or a publicly funded prison, most prisons are publicly funded with taxpayers' dollars, not investors' investments. They are both egregious when it comes to health care. The biggest nursing homes in the country are in prisons because you got old people with long sentences still incarcerated when they're suffering from arthritis and diabetes and kidney disease and all of they need to be in nursing homes, but they're in prisons. And then third, voting always matters. Study, go to League of Women Voters, go to vote.org, go to ncnw. There are a lot of places you can go to get the information. Study the issues, and and you don't have to vote in every race. They say vote up and down the ballot, but you know the ones that are important to you. If it's education you care about, vote for who's running for superintendent of education. Vote for who's running for the state legislature. Pay attention to the state legislature.
And what are the three things we need to know to fix it?
Well, I think they're the same.
Okay.
When we vote consistently and understand who funds what and understand the role of money in this system, it gets better. It gets better.
All right. Janice, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you just sharing your wealth of knowledge, your experience, and for you still being on the battleground. Your history, precedes you and your success precedes you, but I feel good knowing that you're still out there on behalf of us. So we
Well,
really
thank you so much. I have one question for you, though, Kimberly.
okay.
How do I join Mothers of Black Boys United?
Moms of
I
Black
have,
Boys United is mobunited.org. And that is our website. And when you go to our website, you will be able to enter your information there. If you are a mom of a Black boy, then you join as a member, and it will take you to a screen where you can pay dues there, and anything as small as $7 to whatever it is that you can afford. If you are not the mom of a Black boy, then you can become an ally to the organization. You can leave a donation, join our mailing list. Follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube, we are on Facebook and Instagram. I think we're on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now too. But I don't mess around with that too much, so I don't know how to find us there. To be
I'm a
honest,
lost. The more
yeah,
I
full
learn about Elon
transparency.
Musk, the less I want to be involved with Twitter. It's like
But
creepy.
definitely there is nothing too small to be involved. We need every person to, if nothing else, share our messaging. And like I said, we take every donation that someone is able to give. So visit us on our website, www.mobunited.org.
I will do just that. Thank you, Kimberly. It's been great.
Thank you. Join us on March 26th, where we will be talking to Dr. Hasham Batts about Mama. You are making history. We will be celebrating the everyday mother who is making history every day in our community. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and you have a wonderful night.